Be Your Best You, the Passion into Purpose podcast with David Delaney. Good morning and welcome to Be Your Best You, the Passion into Purpose podcast with me, David Delaney, co-hosted this morning by Dr. Rohini Bannerjee, and our guest this morning is Mya Foxx. Mya and Rohini are joining us all the way from Canada, where it's afternoon there. On this recording. Today we're going to talk about lots of things, okay? But fundamentally, we're going to talk about drag. From its start as a theatre slang to its pop culture prowess today, drag has become a celebrated term while keeping its transgressive power. And the word itself is still evolving today. So joining us to talk all things drag is Mya Foxx. Mya is a Halifax-based Inuk drag performer, and by day Dillon works as an HR professional, and by night he transforms into the electrifying performer that is Mya Foxx. From AAA basketball champ to lace front wigs, Mya has had to navigate small town views, toxic masculinity, and more on her journey to true self-acceptance. Through a physical, emotional, and spiritual transformation, Mya helps Dillon access a deeper level of personal understanding, allowing for success and balance into seemingly unrelated endeavors. And my co-host today, Dr. Rohini Bannerjee, is an associate professor of French and Francophone studies in the Department of Modern Languages and Classics at St. Mary's University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. She also contributes to the Asian Studies, Graduate Women and Gender Studies, and Peace and Conflict Studies programs. An instinctive ability to relate to students wherever they come from, and Dr. Bannerjee helps her students realize what is possible. She says herself that there are layers and layers that make up who you are. She tells her students no matter what they do, they're going to be disturbing the peace. So just as she challenges her students to think beyond their limits, she challenges herself. Rohini, Mya, you are both very, very welcome to the podcast.
Thank you,
Thank
David.
you for having me.
Now, let's begin. I think a question. I'm a true gentleman. So, Rohini, my co-host, I'm going to let you ask the first question.
Thank you, Monsieur. I am delighted that we're able to share this space across oceans and lands and across identities. I think everybody here and those listening everywhere around the world experience this identity crisis, moments when we are 11 and 12 and learning about our sexual preferences, when we're in our 20s and experimenting and maybe moving forward on those, early senses of who we are. And then as we mature and fall into the mid 40s, perhaps someone like myself, feel established in who we are. But we're always growing. And Mya, I'm wondering, how do you know when you've stopped growing?
Ooh, I don't think you ever stop growing. That's one thing that I've always kind of believed, that human beings, we are not meant to be stagnant creatures. There's always something to learn. There's always something to work on. And there's always new experiences at hand. And I find, again, I'm in my late 20s now. And every time I kind of approach a milestone where I think, I actually understand this and I'm in a good spot, there's something that kind of shakes my world and, makes me look at something, fresh and new. So, I don't think we're ever done learning. I think it's always kind of a continual process. And I think that's, one of the most exciting things about life. You think you have it figured out and then you don't.
Where did Mya come into being in this journey?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting thing. So I grew up in Cape Breton, which is an island off the coast of Nova Scotia, in kind of a mixed kind of urban and rural community. Where, homophobia is quite rampant, I would say. Even as, things have kind of progressed elsewhere in Canada, it's still a thing in Cape Breton. So, I had a really, really hard time with kind of self-acceptance growing up, and, kind of maybe knew I was different from a young age, but was way too scared to kind of explore that. And I come from a family of where the men are hunters and fishers, and they're into construction and all of these like traditional masculine kind of things. And yes, I had interest in some of those things, but I always knew that there was this other kind of side of me, if you will, and kind of hid that side in a closet, if I guess is probably the best expression. But yeah, hid that away, didn't want to focus on it at all. And then finally, when I was 18, I came out to my family. And that was a bit of a process, of course. There was, kind of varying levels of acceptance and growth that had to happen on both sides. I think one thing that some people kind of glaze over when it comes to people that are coming out is sometimes you think, you come out as being gay or queer or whatever it may be, and then that's immediately it. And it's not. Yes, there's that initial kind of relief, obviously, of getting something off of your chest. But, the subsequent years are really kind of delving into who you are as an individual and exploring these aspects of your personality that you weren't able to really express from a younger age. So, from that point on, it was really kind of getting in touch with what are my interests and what do I really, want to do and what excites me in life. And when I was 24, I decided to take my first dance class, which was something I've always wanted to do. But again, being from that community, boys didn't dance. That was just something you didn't want, kind of attached to yourself or to be viewed as a dancer, which is ridiculous now that I think of it to look at something like that so negatively. And that's kind of where it blossomed. So I got involved in dance and really found a passion for that, and built up a skill, and it was received quite well. And basically what wound up happening is I was recognized by some local drag queens in the area that had reached out to me and said, do you want to, choreograph a performance for us, or would you like to be a backup dancer? And that's kind of how it started. After I did a couple of performances with some of the local drag performers, they were on me. They're like, you need to do this. Like, we see something in you. And again, I kind of pushed that down, pushed that aside, and I wasn't ready for that level of acceptance, I think, at that time. And I think it was really when COVID hit, and you're tucked away indoors for months on end, and you don't have that the level of excitement in your day-to-day life that you're used to. And anyway, an opportunity had presented itself when we kind of came out of lockdown momentarily, and they said, we'd love to have you as a guest performer. And I said, why not? I had that kind of YOLO moment, if you will. And I said, let's give it a go. And at that point, when I started, I thought, it's going to be one show and this and that, but it was so well received. And now kind of fast forward a year later, I'm, performing I'd say probably a minimum of 4 times a month, at least a show or 2 each day on the weekend, doing activities like this in drag, speaking for, community groups, doing all kinds of different activities and what have you. And it's really grown, and I'm just kind of excited to see where it goes from here.
So you said growing up in the, I suppose, the toxic masculinity, let's perhaps call it. Yeah. Do you go back there?
Definitely. And I think, kind of to the point earlier about, do we ever stop growing? I think this kind of coincides with that. Like, yes, you can kind of overcome a hurdle or overcome an obstacle and realize what's on the other side of whatever you're dealing with at that time, but it never really goes away, especially when something like that has been ingrained in you from such a young age, So it's sometimes, I remember after, I think it was like my 3rd or 4th performance, and I kind of had this like breakdown moment of, like, what if somebody sees this? Like, what if, a family member from back home sees me in a wig and makeup? What's the reaction going to be? Or what if this is going to hinder my professional life, with my day job, because obviously I still do work during the day. So I don't think it ever really goes away and you go back there. But I think what the difference is you learn the skills to combat that and silence that kind of inner voice in the back of your head that kind of self-sabotages, really. So it's still something that's constantly there, but I think more equipped to handle it. And just being exposed to other ways of life, and connecting with the community here, and connecting with people like Dr. Bannerjee, who I'm a former student of hers, and hearing some of the stories and inspiration and those kinds of pieces. I just think that you're better equipped moving forward.
Speaking of equipment, I'm seeing a
Yes.
lot of color on that very masculine face of yours.
Yes.
Yeah, that deep, gorgeous masculine voice, and then I'm seeing some gorgeous color. And you know, I love makeup.
Yes.
We've talked about the empowering act of wearing makeup. And you know, makeup gets a bad rap, I think. I think we get a lot of sort of this bare face beauty, and I don't need makeup, and it's patriarchal. And I think that's a load of crap, I think, because I feel personally that makeup's been very empowering for me as a woman of color, somebody who's not really appreciated the color of my eyes or the shape of my eyes, et cetera, et cetera. And I've been playing with that. And as I age, have been probably more daring than I was maybe 15 years ago with color. And you know that I've been wearing eye makeup as a professor for a long time. So tell me, and tell us and tell our listeners, what does makeup do for you? How is that part of your empowerment and your growth as Mya?
Yeah. So I mean, I think, you know, you bring up a really interesting point. And I think, you know, who are we or who is anybody to determine what is empowering to another person? And the way that you find empowerment may be very different from how I find empowerment. So when we talk about makeup, some people, you know, maybe it is a fresh face and they feel better like that and they don't want to have to put something on, whereas other people feel better applying it. And the same kind of goes, you know, if we look at it from like a masculine perspective, and, you know, maybe it's winning competitions or going out and I don't know, competition is the main thing that kind of comes to mind. Whereas other men may find empowerment in doing something like what I'm doing in terms of, you know, going out as a drag queen. So, I mean, in terms of, you know, makeup itself, I think one thing that it allows me to do, it allows me to kind of access a creative side of myself that I never really developed, but I always knew was there. I always, you know, from a young age, I was always kind of obsessed with pop culture. And, you know, from watching like the award shows with my mother at home and it kind of the glamour and the glitz and all of those kinds of things. But it was silently at the side and didn't want to seem too interested, but was, you know, always, always had that interest, I suppose. So I guess, you know, when it comes to makeup, I never do the same thing twice. I'm always kind of experimenting and finding out what works for my face and being able to give kind of different looks. And right now, I know most people can't see me, but, you know, kind of giving like a little Jennifer Lopez salsa dancer kind of look right now. And last week, you know, I had very dark makeup on and did something more kind of spooky and gloomy and this and that. So it's definitely a way of expression, and it's a way to challenge yourself as well. And one thing that I really do enjoy about makeup is it's one of the only times I find in my day-to-day life that I am just with myself and I can just kind of observe myself and take the time to just be in the moment. I think we're also go, 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 go. It's you're always elsewhere, but with this, it's something that you're kind of working on methodically, and it's a kind of therapy, really.
If you guys are familiar, I'm not sure you are, Panty Bliss. There was a moment in Ireland and the world a couple of years ago, a drag queen in Ireland responded in drag on our national theatre, the Abbey Theatre, about oppression and what it felt like to be oppressed. And the fact that Panty became more recognised for that speech as Panty, okay, on the National Theatre of Ireland, okay, the small Catholic quote unquote country. How important do you feel, like, drag has a message, and do you feel it has progressed, I suppose, positively with the likes of, say, RuPaul's Drag Race, the platforms that we now have, like, you know, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. Do you think these things are positive for drag, or what are your thoughts on, I suppose, how drag is perceived now as maybe it was, you know, back at the origin of?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, definitely overall it has been a positive change. You know, going back, I mean, drag, you know, was kind of used as an acronym in theater previously when women weren't allowed in the theater, and drag basically stands for dressed as a girl. So, you know, that's kind of where it stems from. But there's always, you know, I mean, through history, in kind of you know, change of gender roles or playing of the other gender, or whatever that means. So it dates back, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years, really. But I mean, in more recent times, I think the definition of what drag is has definitely changed, and it's become more open. And to me, drag is a means of expression through gender and performance. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to swap genders. You could enhance, exaggerate your own gender, or maybe play with something that is more androgynous or non-binary. So I think, where drag has become more mainstream in recent years due to shows like RuPaul's Drag Race, people are more open to alternatives and to play with those types of things and really kind of break out of their own box. So, I mean, we've seen, on TV recently, we've seen non-binary performers, we've seen AFAB queens, which is assigned female at birth queens. So a female that presents as female that presents female drag, but a more exaggerated version of, kind of the female persona, if you will. So it's all about playing with that. And I think, again, it just leads to more kind of acceptance and awareness. And, I see it day to day with my shows here locally. We're by no means on the main stage of RuPaul's Drag Race or any of these other fantastic shows, but we still see people and newbies come out to the shows, on a weekly basis. And you see that kind of general apprehension at the beginning, especially, there's a girl that's dragging her straight boyfriend to the show, and you can just see he's all uptight before the show starts. And by the end of it, he's screaming and clapping and throwing money around and giving us tips, and it's celebrated, right? And it's really a good time. And I mean, the thing with drag is, yes, there is a message, and I think it's important that those that we use our platform, whether that's on a local stage or on an international stage, to talk about some of these issues. But it's all meant to be fun, and in an expression from your side of the pond, again, take the piss out of whatever it is that you're dealing with, right? So, it's not meant to be taken too seriously. So, I mean, like I've done performances where, I'm talking about one of the province's decisions to not recognize land claims and to give land acknowledgements for, the indigenous people of that area. And I speak very seriously about that. And then, 20 minutes later, I'm going out and doing a performance carrying a bunch of blenders with milkshakes in it. Like it's that fine line of, yes, it's serious and knowing when to communicate, but also I guess just to have fun. And I think people need that. And overall, it's celebrated for both.
I want to go back to some of that seriousness that you just mentioned. So thank you for bringing up your use of the platform and the recognition and the spotlight. You're using your spotlight for good, right? And Dr. Toni Morrison, the great writer, American writer, talked about the fact that once we have access and privilege to something, I'm paraphrasing, it's our duty to let others have that opportunity. And so I know that within the Halifax community, I've seen you, using your platform, and that's part of the reason why I wanted you on the show with David. But one of the things I do want to share with our listeners, especially those who are not from Canada, is your identity as an Indigenous person. And we've alluded to Cape Breton. There's a beautiful place in Nova Scotia for all of those who want to come to Halifax. Please come to Cape Breton as well. But the Indigenous side of you, your Inuk identity, the fact that you connect and are reconnecting perhaps with your Indigenous background, and with the Truth and Reconciliation ongoing work that we're doing here in Canada and in Turtle Island in general. And I will have to say that we are on unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And so what does land acknowledgement mean to you? What does it mean to be an Indigenous performer? Are you an Indigenous performer, or is Mya separate from that?
Yeah, so I think, recognizing my own identity has been a bit of a journey as well. So I am of mixed heritage. So my grandfather on my mother's side is Labrador Inuk, and then I'm mixed with, various European ethnicities, so Romanian, Scottish, this and that. But I don't suffer under the delusion that I don't benefit from white privilege either. And, I recognize that most of the world, or a lot of the world, will view me as a white person. And there's certain benefits that are attached with that. So it's been, and I think this is something that, a lot of mixed people kind of struggle with, is where do they belong? And, how much do they share their own voice? And is it appropriate to be a voice of, the community that you may belong to, but is marginalized? So it's this kind of fine line, and I'm very much kind of aware of that as well. With that being said, it's, I've struggled in the past of, do I take space as an Indigenous person? Do I occupy that? Is that appropriate for me to do, given that I do have that white privilege? But I mean, the fact of the matter is, my great grandmother was, essentially a slave for a white family off the coast of Newfoundland. And, there's implications and intergenerational trauma that has resulted because of that. So I feel like, out of respect for my own ancestors and my own history, that it's a disservice to not recognize that. So, and that being said, where this happened to her at such a young age, a lot of kind of culture and history, stories, those kinds of things weren't necessarily passed along down the family line because of the own kind of trauma that she dealt with. So it's a lot of the things that I've been connecting with has been, going out and meeting other Indigenous people and exploring that history myself. So, it's definitely been a journey. In terms of, what I can do as a performer to recognize that and be a voice for that, again, in our shows, we do, we make sure that there is a land acknowledgement that takes place. And again, as an Inuk person, Inuit weren't here in Nova Scotia. We're not part of that necessarily. It is the Mi'kmaq, but again, we're kind of cut from the same cloth and have experienced the same kind of things. So again, out of respect for that that other group of Indigenous people, I always make sure that we're bringing that into the shows. I was part of a QT BIPOC showcase this summer for Halifax Pride, which featured, Indigenous artists, Black artists, other people of color in our own kind of standalone showcase. And we were able to bring in kind of cultural elements, on top of kind of pop music and those kinds of things. So again, just being a voice and being, I guess, a representation of that history and of that culture, and being able to share that education as well with other people. And I think, again, given my kind of unique situation of being a mixed person, I can kind of walk that line between the two groups. So being able to educate people that belong in that majority. So, typically white people here in Nova Scotia about, what does it mean to be Indigenous and what kind of traumas have we lived and what are the implications of that today and how can we kind of rectify that moving forward? So, I kind of do that on a case by case basis. I'm not, calling people out on my Instagram or anything like that. But if I see something, it's, let's have that conversation and discuss how we can move that forward. One of the projects that I'm currently working on with another BIPOC performer here in Halifax, we're working on putting together kind of a new drag performer showcase that showcases BIPOC talent. So basically what we would do is act as mentors for these up and coming performers and help them out to again take the stage, because there is a lot that goes into this. As fun as it is, it's how do you do your makeup? How do you cut a lace front wig? How do you make hip pads if that's what you're looking to do? So there's all of these kinds of things that are kind of hindrances for people, and of course there's the kind of societal and economic barriers as well. But if we can at least be that kind of helping hand and guiding force to give these people the spotlight as well, that's very rewarding. So again, that's something else that I'm working on right now.
I'm just thinking about our listeners who may not know what BIPOC means. So that is Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And it's a term that's used within Turtle Island, within North America, commonly. I think in Europe, it might be a slightly different acronym. I'm wondering with this BIPOC, and I'm all about looking at the racialized experience within marginalized communities and that sort of double marginalization and, beyond, and you've acknowledged very openly your white privilege and the fact that you can be white passing and that requires probably a little bit less effort for those who might be from Bangladesh, for example, or Myanmar, and who are coming out and realizing that makeup, wigs, those beautiful boots, killer legs, and a great song can really make or break your identity journey. And could you just go a little bit further on how Halifax Pride and perhaps your experience within the drag community for our friends in the BIPOC community? I'm thinking particularly of those really young ones in their early 20s who, because of COVID, couldn't go home. We're noticing a huge diversity awesomeness here in Halifax. We're seeing more and more people of color because they literally were stranded and not able to go home, and perhaps are using that and kind of like what happened with Mya, are using this opportunity to grow and be themselves. Are you noticing? Have you had contact with, and how are we developing opportunities for our BIPOC drag community?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, there's always more work to be done on that front. And again, back to the earlier points, we can never kind of be satisfied with where things are at currently. We always have to keep moving moving the needle forward. But, again, just in this past year, I've noticed a lot of change. Again, going back to what I said about the BIPOC showcase for the performers, that was something, again, that had a great turnout. We saw a lot of representation there, and what was great about that is everybody that was involved in that showcase had to be part of that community down to the material that we were performing. So if I was going to do a song, it had to be by a BIPOC artist. If I was going to have dancers, they had to be BIPOC as well. So again, creating that space, and there was a real deliberate effort from Halifax Pride this year to make sure that happened. Even in terms of, the board and the representation within that organization, it's a quite diverse group with varying backgrounds, whether that be, again, BIPOC or varying gender identities and what have you. There were specific events that were put on for different communities. So again, back to, Indigenous identities, there were specific events for Two-Spirit queer youth. So again, to be able to connect both on a cultural level, but also on, as a sexual orientation and a gender level. So we talk about that kind of intersectionality, and that was, again, a deliberate effort by Halifax Pride. So I was very happy to see that. In terms of what we see in the drag community, again, kind of the project that I mentioned coming up, that's one thing that, is in the works. There are a number of other BIPOC performers that will have, specific kind of BIPOC shows, or have them at least be the majority of the cast of the show, again, just to elevate them. In some of our shows that we host, we always make sure that we're reserving space for those individuals of difference. And again, to make sure that we are showcasing, performers of color, but also, again, performers that aren't just typical drag queens. Maybe there's drag kings, maybe there's non-binary folks, there's, AFAB or, AFAB queens or whatever it may be. So, there is kind of a deliberate effort there. And what I like about that is I find that it's kind of broadening this sense of community so that you're not constantly in a situation where it's the same kind of people, performing all of the time. And again, in a smaller city like Halifax, it's very easy for that to happen. I mean, we only, there's not that many performers to go around, but there's a deliberate effort to, engage new performers and elevate those that maybe may not have that platform.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there anything that Mya would do and get away with that Dillon never could?
Oh, yeah, probably. Probably. I mean, like, in some of our performances and whatnot, and again, for those who haven't been to a drag show, it's typically a lip sync performance, or some queens will perform live. But, you're performing for an audience, and then if people really like the performance, they'll raise a tip up and you go over and you collect your tip. And I've done many different things for tips and things like that. So it's, you kind of explore a different side as a performer, and there is a sexuality about that, and kind of an eroticism about that as well. So again, I find that Mya is not so much different than Dillon. I would say that Mya is kind of an extension of my personality. All of this stuff is in me as Dillon, but she allows that space to be able to experiment. And sometimes I do things and I'm like, oh my God, okay, I'll never do that again. That's not for me, or whatever it may be. But it is kind of an armor, if you will. I think when I kind of become Mya and I put the wig on, I put the makeup on, I put the outfits on, it allows me to kind of tap into a certain confidence and experiment with different things that I wouldn't be able to do as Dillon. I think the box is already shattered when I become Mya, if you will, and you're not kind of working within the confines of, kind of self-imposed barriers or societally imposed barriers or whatever that may be. So I definitely think that there is, more freedom. And what's been great about that, though, is in exploring that, I've been able to take some of those aspects and then apply that in my regular life as Dillon. So, you know, I've noticed myself, I've become kind of more, I've always been an extrovert, but more extroverted, and I'm not scared to share, you know, about myself and whatnot. And I think back to, you know, when I first came out, and yes, I was out as a gay man, but I'd have an interaction with a straight guy and my voice would automatically drop an octave or two. And, you know, kind of the subject matter of the conversation that I was having would change, or whatever it may be, excuse me. And I don't do that as much anymore. I'm less scared to be myself, and I find I live more authentically. And, you know, I'll talk about drag in my day-to-day life, or I'll talk about you know, listening to the Pussycat Dolls, which I wouldn't have talked about before, you know. No, and it wasn't necessarily lying or saying things that weren't true, but it was more of filtering the kind of actions and dialogue that I would participate in. So yeah, again, it's I would say yes, it's you know, Mya allows for that space, and I would say I am more daring as Mya comparative to when I'm Dillon.
What scares you?
Ooh, what scares me? I would say I have sometimes a little bit of imposter syndrome, if you will. I would say sometimes I question, you know, my own value in the sense of, you know, did I earn this, or is this just a fluke? When in the reality of that is I know I work my ass off all the time, whatever it is that I do, and I've always kind of been like that. If I'm going to do something, I do it 110%. So it's not justified. I know I put the work in, but sometimes I question it, you know. And I'd say another thing that kind of scares me is people not recognizing my true intentions. Sometimes what winds up happening is because I am so kind of focused and motivated, and I'm trying to get to that goal, that makes other people uncomfortable sometimes. And I think they misconstrue that as being, you know, selfish or having my own agenda or whatever it may be, when really it's being goal oriented and trying to challenge myself. And in that journey, I'm always focused on bringing other people with me. And the way that I look at it is, if I'm doing well and I can help somebody else, they're doing well as well, you know, and it's about sharing that. So, you know, I worry sometimes about my intentions being misconstrued.
So dance is physically tough. I mean, you're telling me,
Yes.
you're telling us, you know, 4 times. You're telling us 4 times that a month you are performing.
Yes.
And you know, might work a full shift all day using your frontal lobe and
Yep.
maybe sitting in front of a computer. But then you got to put on the makeup and put on the boots and put on the outfit and put on Mya, or let Mya come out.
Yeah.
And then perhaps you then have to do some stretches and get those hip flexors and IT bands ready for the gluteus maximus that you've got to bring on the bottom, because I've seen you squat. I know what that looks like. You're wearing 6-inch heels. The physicality of dance, and you know, there is the obvious, the self-expression.
Yeah.
And obvious, that aspect that you alluded to earlier about wanting to dance, or perhaps being interested in dance, but didn't really want to, you know, look at that, think about it when you were growing up. But tell us about the physicality of it, about how has your body changed? I remember Dillon in his early 20s, was always, you know, going to the gym and very physically fit and fairly muscular. How has your body changed? What are you noticing about Mya's, you know, infiltration on Dillon's cis male body? How is that happening? What's the physicality? So tell me, first of all, tell me how you tell us how you stay so fit. And second of all, how has your body changed physically as Mya?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always I've always been a very active person. And as David kind of alluded to in my intro, you know, I was a high level basketball player for many, many years. So I've always been around exercise and sports and the gym and those kinds of things. So, you know, in a way, nothing has kind of changed, but the mediums in which I partake in those activities has changed. So, you know, there is kind of a diligence that you have to have in order to be a performer, because again, like you say, it is so physical. So, I mean, I'm in dance class usually once a week, in addition to my performances training and learning new choreography and learning new styles and what have you. And then I still go to the gym, you know, as much as I, you know, I love performing as Mya. The majority of my time is spent as Dillon, and I want to be healthy and I want to look good. You know, I still want to have that. But I would say, as opposed to just a general kind of fitness and well-being, it is more targeted now, that I have to be flexible. I have to be able to balance. I have to, you know, have the core strength to be able to support some of these dance moves and whatnot that I'm doing. So it is a different, more kind of targeted approach, if you will. But yeah, I mean, it's there is kind of an expectation, I guess, as a dancer and as a performer to look a certain way. I would say I'm less wrapped up in the aesthetic of it and more so the functionality now. And I just want my body to feel good and be healthy and be able to have the endurance and withstand what I'm doing to it. Because I mean, it is hard. I mean, again, for those who aren't familiar with drag, I mean, oftentimes we're performing and we have either like a body cincher or a corset on to suck everything in. You're wearing hip pads with probably 5-6 pairs of tights. So it's very, very tight on your legs. You're sweating. It's hard on your toes. They're curled up because of how tight the tights are. And then on top of that, then you have, you know, 4 to 6 inch heels. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. And I remember when I first started, I was like, you know, I'm very physically fit. I'm in the gym all the time, all this kind of stuff. And I had things hurt that I didn't know existed, because it just uses a completely different part of your body. But yeah, it's interesting. And I think, you know, to have this very kind of masculine body where I have a little bit of muscle mass as a guy, and again, you know, a lower voice and a jaw and all these kinds of things. And then to see that transformation when I go into Mya and to feminize my face and to feminize my body and to just see it myself, but also see other people's reactions. Like, you know, there's certain people, it's like I'll be walking down the street until they get close to me if they don't know what they're dealing with. And it's been interesting. There's a different market out there for sure that are interested in this. I don't know about that for me, but yeah. But yeah, I'm basically a married woman these days. I'm a long-term relationship, but Mya gets a whole different set of attention than what Dillon has gotten. Yeah.
What turns? Okay, we've all been in situations where we've been in drag clubs or, you know, drag act, and I in my lifetime, I think I was in Lanzarote once and I seen an horrific, and it's the only way to describe it. It looked like they didn't put any effort in it up. That's fine. It's what they wanted to do. But what is the secret? As well, I have 2 questions I kind of want to ask. Is one, I'm just intrigued, is if you were pushed, how quickly can you get into drag and get into, you know, the zone? But what is the secret ingredient that turns good drag into great drag?
Okay. So, I mean, in terms of time, I take a very long time. They make fun of me, the other queens, because I don't like to be rushed. Like if I have a show that night, I'll start painting, and again, painting, for those who don't know, is when you're putting your makeup on, you paint your face. That's the expression. So I'll start painting, you know, three hours before I need to go on. That's if I'm taking my time. If I need to get the job done and I need to, you know, I'm in a crunch time or whatever it may be, I can get everything done in probably about an hour and a half. So, you know, but again, it's the level of detail and how much you're doing, you know, with your eye work, and there's all kinds of, there's different levels to it, right? In terms of what takes good drag into great drag, and I think I'm still in this kind of period myself. I'm still kind of figuring this out and working towards it. I think it's about finding what you naturally have first and foremost, and capitalizing on that. And making that the centerpiece of your drag. And again, everybody has their own thing. Again, my number one thing is I'm a dancer. When I go out and you come to a Mya Foxx show, you're going to see choreography, you're going to see high energy, you're going to see, splits and dips and all kinds of different things. That's not everybody's strong suit. One of my drag sisters, Rachel Lush, she's a fantastic dancer. Don't get me wrong. We do group choreography and all of those kinds of things, but her thing is makeup. And she focuses highly, highly on her makeup. And when you look at her face, it's flawless. There's nothing out of place. It looks like she spent probably 12 hours doing it, but she does it in an hour. And that's her strength, right? Another one of my sisters, Brooke Rivers, she's more of a seamstress, and she makes all of her own costumes, and she does things that I could never do, right? And she turns that out, and that's what she focuses on. She has all of the other elements, don't get me wrong, but again, that's where she really puts her effort in. And then another one of my sisters, Trinity Fox, she's a very well-rounded performer, and she puts a lot of effort in when it comes to comedy and performance and those kinds of things. So again, we all kind of have our own strong point. You have to have everything. You can't go out there and not know how to do your makeup. You can't go out there and not know how to work a crowd. You need those kinds of things. But I think it's about capitalizing on that one thing. And I think what sometimes happens is people get wrapped up in trying to be everything. And I think very few people can do that, right? You can't be, a fantastic comedian and an amazing seamstress and a singer and a dancer and all of those kinds of things. If you can, amazing. That's great for you. But I think it's about really finding your thing, working really hard at that, and then rounding everything out afterwards.
If Mya wanted to or could, had the possibility of performing with anyone out there, who would she choose other than myself, of course? Of course.
We're going to do this someday. I think we're going to get into a dance studio.
I do want to go to the class with you and just do the whole thing. Other than me,
yes.
Who would Mya want to share the stage with?
So I kind of just had this, to be honest with you. I met an idol of mine a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to do this as a two-part thing. So one of the artists or groups that really, really inspires me and has since I was a young kid is the Pussycat Dolls. And I love them so much. And again, for those who aren't familiar with the story, a lot of people know their songs and whatnot, but the Pussycat Dolls started as burlesque dancers in kind of an underground Los Angeles scene, and kind of took the industry by storm. So they started probably 10 years before they ever got signed to a record label, and kind of revolutionized modern dance from a female perspective. So we see, currently we see that kind of heels dance, we see that kind of Beyonce style, all of that. A lot of that started with the Pussycat Dolls and their founder, Robin Antin. So Robin Antin is the choreographer and the founder of that group. And I actually got to meet Robin and perform with Robin about 2 or 3 weeks ago. She came here to Halifax and I took a class with her. And again, when I registered as Dillon, and I often will go to dance class as Dillon. And I thought about it. I said, listen, should I go as Mya? Why, how should I show up here? And I said, her work and, everything that she's done over the years has inspired this character, this person that I've become in the way that I perform as a drag queen on a weekly basis. And I'm like, I need to show her this. And I got to meet her. She was amazing. We performed together. I have a video on my Instagram. I cried. It was great. We took pictures, and she actually reposted me on her Instagram profile, and she gave me the hashtag Queen Doll. And it was just kind of next level, kind of a full circle moment, because again, back in, to rewind, back when I was living in Cape Breton in junior high school, when I was too scared to go to a dance class, I would spend hours on YouTube watching the Pussycat Dolls and their performances and learning their choreography. And that was my kind of way to express myself in my dining room by myself with the blinds closed at the time. And that's all that I really had. So to have, to build on that over the years, become a performer myself, and then to actually meet the woman that inspired all of that, it was kind of a full circle moment for sure. So yeah, so again, I met Robin. I'd like to meet the rest of the girls. I'd like to perform with the rest of the Pussycat Dolls. That'd be great. But I feel like I'm content right now. That was a major kind of milestone for me.
Mya, you've actually rolled about 3 questions we were going to ask into that one answer. So
okay.
But I am going to ask you, right? Yeah, what was the last thing that made you cry? Okay, so fine, you've answered that. I would think, okay. What was the last thing that made you cry? Was it?
Last thing that made me cry. So it actually, it wasn't that. I'll be honest with you. The last thing that probably made me cry was my partner, and it wasn't in a bad way. But my partner, amazing guy. We've been together for about 3 years, and we're very opposites. Like he's a Navy boy, he's a mechanic, he's that broy kind of, he does all of those things. But he has just such kind of a pure heart and accepts all of this nonsense that I put him through. He comes home, there's makeup on the table, there's wigs, there's this and that, and just so out of his his day to day. And, we were just talking, he comes to my shows and he accepts everything. And, as a little gay boy from Cape Breton that never thought I'd ever find that acceptance, to find somebody that kind of welcomes that and loves that and just rolls with it. I had a moment after a show talking to him and was just like, so appreciative of, just his willingness to go with that. Because for a lot of people, this is not cool. You know what I mean? This is not accepted. And I think that's kind of a problem even in the gay community, that we still kind of hold masculinity as a kind of currency. How masculine are you and you become more desirable somehow. I've kind of worked through that myself, and to see that he really doesn't give a shit about any of that is fantastic. So yeah, that was probably the last thing that made me cry.
I just want to say we're coming towards the end, and I just want to say thank you, because there's a lot. Before I ask my last question, and I'm going to give Rohini her last question. It takes a lot to say some of the things that you've come on here this evening and said, and that takes courage, and it takes I just want to say thanks, because it means a lot, and I know people out there listening, and there are people out there who want to do that, who want to dance in their dining rooms, and they want to bring it forward, and they want to do all these things as young kids. And you're a shining beacon in that. And you can just say, you know what, fuck this. I know we said don't say fuck or bugger, but you've said fuck this. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to. So I think I think you just need to make a point of that. So gratitude.
Thank you so much.
Right, sloppy moment gone. I want to ask you.
I'm gonna cry again. My new moment of when I cry.
Okay, excellent. That'll be for the next
Yeah.
podcast. Okay, but I don't want to ruin your makeup. I want to ask you, who would play you in the movie of your life?
Oh God. Oh, who would play me? Oh. It's Rohini Bannerjee. Yeah. I'm trying to think who would play me. I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. I'm not sure. I guess I'll kind of approach this in a different way. Like somebody who I've always kind of looked up to in the entertainment industry in particular, that kind of does it all and doesn't really give a shit, is somebody like Jennifer Lopez. So somebody who, she does music, she does acting, she has a clothing line, she does all of those kinds of things. And she gets a lot of flack. There's a lot of people that say, you're just a pretty face, or you're this, or you can't sing, and she just does it, and she's a megastar. So I think when I think of somebody that has, that is similar to me, or somebody that I look up to in that way, it would be her. So maybe Jennifer Lopez. I don't know how she would look as a, in boy drag in Cape Breton. But, I think she could pull this off, or I try to pull her off, I should say.
Well, I've got sort of a closing question for you that perhaps you could, get our listeners to think about the future of Mya. And we always forget about the present, right? So we're always thinking about what's the next project for Mya. And we've already asked you these questions, right? Who's going to play you in a movie, and what are you doing for the BIPOC, and go, do. But in 5 years, looking back, when you listen to this podcast back in 5 years on some interesting device, it'll be something fantastic. In 5 years, will Mya still be Mya? I mean, we talked about growth in the beginning. We know that growth continues. We know that you are growing. You've grown in this 1 hour that we spent together. We've all grown a little bit. I feel I'm a different person than I was before I started talking to you. In 5 years, when you go back and listen to this podcast, how much growth have you had? Has had Dillon, Mya, your partner, your entourage, your family, but that spirit of what you're bringing forward. So just forget about Mya maybe, and forget about Dillon.
Yeah.
You know, there's this other entity that you are bringing forward. I feel like there's another third part of you. There's just some other thing that's growing out of you that maybe plays on both sides of who you are. And so in 5 years, when you listen back to this podcast, how much growth will have happened? I think that's a future tense of some sort.
Yes. No, it's funny you say that with, Dillon and Mya and this third. I just watched a documentary on Billy Milligan, and I feel like there's another altar coming forward. But yeah, no, it's, I guess it's so hard to say. Did I think at 27 years old I'd become a drag queen? Absolutely not. I think it's so hard to predict these things, and that excites me. It really, really does. So, will Mya still be around? Will I still be doing the day-to-day as Dillon? It's hard to say. I think so, and I hope so. I think, this kind of realization of, becoming a performer has kind of unlocked something in me, if you will. Like it's something that was always there. I remember, back when I was a kid, my parents and grandparents, they used to call me Jim Carrey because I was always performing and making people laugh and doing those kinds of things. And then as you get older and you go through puberty, it's like that's dimmed and you become this filtered, watered down version of yourself. And I just got to a point in my life where I said, no, I need to see what's on the other side of this door, and play with it. And one of the quotes that I sent in, one of my favorite quotes is by RuPaul, who says, use all of the colors in the crayon box. So, I'm sorry. But it's what that means in essence is get in there, get messy, try things on, see what works for you, and don't stay in your lane. Always look for other areas of opportunity. And as much as you know yourself and you bring forward those kind of values and hard personality traits that are long-standing, be open to new things. And I remember something you mentioned in one of our classes years ago, Rohini, and this really stuck with me, is you were telling a story, but when I think you were doing your undergrad, and you were on your way to medical school at the time, and you were doing, I think it was a Bachelor of Science in biology, but then you also picked up French at the same time. And you had a lot of flack against that because people were saying, what do French and biology have to do with each other? Why wouldn't you do something more in the same lane? And your response to them was, why not? I have an interest in both things, so why not? And life takes a turn and all this kind of stuff. And now you teach French and you're in this department and all of those kinds of things. And that really stuck with me because I think previously I was always trying to stay in my lane and stay on this trajectory that I had laid out for myself. And there was a lot of misery in that in a certain type of way because I was not open to these other experiences. And I think through the the last few years, and in particular in the last year since becoming Mya, I've really just kind of shoved all that away and I'm open to anything. So I think where I'll be in 5 years, I hope I'm still performing. I hope I have a larger platform. And even in my day-to-day life, I worked as an HR professional, and in that a lot of it is about developing people and helping people realize their true potential, and more from kind of a corporate or I guess professional view, but that still rings true in what I'm doing as a drag queen. It's about elevating other people, celebrating each other, and the rewards for that are fantastic. Like when I do a show, or I've taught a dance class in drag, and I've had people come up to me and just thank me for having this platform, or allowing them to escape, or allowing them to see something about themselves in me, or whatever it may be. So I want to continue doing that and helping out other people along the way.
We're heading towards time, and you mentioned the quote, or I know I was flapping frantically because I was going to say that. Don't be afraid.
Sorry.
It's okay. We'll say it again because it's a fantastic quote. Don't be afraid to use all the colors in the crayon box. And I think that's an absolutely fantastic quote, because that's one of the first things we do is the crayons, and we got to use them all. There's enough colors there to go around. There's enough things. There's enough creation to be had from that box of colors, and you, Mya Foxx, do it absolutely fabulously. Okay, I want to thank you, and I want to thank co-host this evening, Rohini Bannerjee. Boom! Thank you as always for supporting, joining, and being the inspiration behind so many of the episodes as well. Mya, tell us where we can find you.
Yes.
Online, offline. Tell us where we can find you.
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram, and that's at Mya Foxx. So that's MYAFOXX_HFX for Halifax. It's a long-winded one, but the other Mya Foxx was taken. I tried to email her. She won't give me the name. So anyway, Mya Foxx_HFX. You can find me on there. That's probably the best way to connect with me. Find me here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We've got some gigs going on. I have a tour coming up in December in New Brunswick, so you may catch me there as well.
Mya, Rohini, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mya.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that's it for another week. Thanks for joining us this morning, and do join us next time on Be Your Best You. Have a good week.